On this one, the long road to success for Huey Lewis and the News. He's won Grammys, an Emmy, a Dove Award, and he's one heck of an engineer-producer, working with artists like Barbra Streisand, Carly Simon, Ringo Starr, Marvin Gaye, Leo Sayer, Olivia Newton-John. There was Neil Diamond, Steely Dan, Pablo Cruz, Huey Lewis and the News, and don't forget Boz Scaggs, Chicago, Whitney Houston, Miles Davis, Dire Straits, George Benson, and a heck of a lot of other artists that we have not mentioned because the list would just be too long.
Oh, the Huey Lewis on their first album.
Yeah, I produced a band called Pablo Cruz.
Yeah.
And their manager, Bob Brown, called me one day and said, can you come up here? I want you to hear a band and tell me I'm crazy. So I went up, flew up and went into Uncle Charlie's that night with Bob and sat there and heard Huey Lewis and American Express, as they were called. And went to the dressing room and we hung out and just chatted and whatnot. And I said, the next day, Bob called me and said, well, what'd you think? And I said, well, I think the band is pretty good. The songs need some work, but that kid is a star. There was just no doubt about it. You could just tell, no uncertain terms. So I came back, we got together and went over the material and a bit, and then went into a local studio in the Bay Area and did some demos. And Bob took them all around, got turned down by everybody. And it wasn't until I think it was Chris Ellis of Chrysalis that went up to San Francisco to Uncle Charlie's and watched them and heard and saw what I saw. Yeah. Because to see him on stage was to know, this has to happen. This guy is just too good. And so we decided, Bob and I talked about, where to record in San Francisco. And we finally made the decision, maybe it'd be good to do it in LA to get them out of San Francisco. It'll cost more money, but it might be worth it. So we got a house in Laurel Canyon, that great area that's so famous in the 60s for, all the incredible music that was made there. Because, a third of all talent lived there, it seems like, when you start seeing the records that came from the artists up there. And we got a house in Laurel Canyon, a nice big house. And I was talking to Huey and I told him about American Recording, where I started. And he wanted to see it. I told him it was a very old school studio, and we went there and he fell in love with the place. It had a homemade console from the 60s with rotary faders. And, it had a smell that had been lived in and whatnot. And it had an incredible vibe. There's no question. And he just jumped on it like white on rice. And I was a little nervous about it because things had, technically and whatnot had changed, and I'd grown a lot since then. But we did it there and very quickly. And I was always nervous about that album because as we were doing it, because I never heard anything close to a hit. And so when we got into the overdub process, I called Bob and I said, Bob, I really don't think there's a hit on this album. And he said, are you serious? And I said, I'm very dead serious. He said, well, mix the two that you think are the best, or make it three. And I said, okay. And I mixed the three that I thought would work. And he picked them up and went to Chrysalis and played them, called me after the meeting and said, they think we're absolutely fine. This is a hit and that's a hit. And if we get lucky, that third one could even make noise. I said, okay. So we did, that's what we did. And the record came out. And they put a big push on it, and it went flying straight up and straight down, like with an anchor. And it, didn't surprise me necessarily, but But at this point, a year later, I'm building my studio, and I get a call from Huey, who sounds horrible. And I said, "What's the matter?" And he said, well, I just had a meeting with Chrysalis, and the A&R guy says that we got to get another producer because there were no hits on the record. And I turned 3 shades of red, I'm sure, but I didn't show any reaction to him. I just said, I remember it like it was yesterday. I said, Huey, This is a rough and tumble business, but you're going to make it, whether I'm with you or not. I promise you, and I'll be there egging you on. And I instantly called the Roger Watson. I didn't name very many names in the book, but that might have negativity attached to them, but I did name this one. And I set up a meeting with he and his boss, where they took me to dinner, and I laid into it. And I said, oh, because I left out a piece of it, which was when the album was done, we had a playback party at the house in Laurel Canyon. And we invited some of the friends. They had friends in the Doobie Brothers. They came down and whatnot. And those playback parties, there's a lot of backslapping going on and whatever. But Roger Watson, the A&R guy, came up to me and said, well, Bill, what do you think? And I said, Roger, I'll tell you what I think. I think we don't have a hit on this record. And he looked at me like I was drunk, and I don't drink. And he said, no, I think we're fine. Well, as it turned out we weren't fine. So I had this dinner with he and his boss, and I laid it all out to him, and that and $3 won't get you a latte at Starbucks. So that was it. And so somehow then Huey calls me a little while later, and he said, I've met with 3 different producers and I hate them all. And I said, well, you're going to have to do something. And so a little while later, he and one of the guys showed up at my work site studio, and he said, we just came from a studio where we recorded with one of them, and I won't play it for you. I'm embarrassed. If that's what they think we are, I'm not going to make records. That's all there is to it. And so that's from there. I don't know exactly what happened, except that somehow Bob talked Chrysalis into letting Huey and the band produce themselves, which is even more of an affront, because now it's almost as if I'm the reason, here I'm the only person that said that there wasn't a hit on that first record, and now I'm getting punished for it. I mean, it just, to which I got to say, Bob, I hold Bob responsible on that front for not sticking up for me. But anyway, they went in and cut the next album, and funny enough, they noticed that they hadn't written any hits, and so he called his old producer, Mutt Lange in England, and said, I need a single. And Mutt gave him the song that became Do You Believe in Love?
Yeah, picture
had
this.
a different title on it, and he changed the title, and obviously that was the hit. And of course, their songwriting, they'd already left that new wave thing of the first album, which I never liked anyway, that all those, eighth notes going all the time, all that stuff. They'd already left that, and they were morphing into what on the third album became sports, where it happened. And of course, artists, and that's what's so sad, because I mean, Huey and I got on famously, and I knew that we were going to be making records till we were old and gray, and one little A&R man messed that up, fortunately. And those kind of things, the good news about this story is, yeah, it wasn't very fortunate, it was very unfortuitous for Bill Schnee, but the bigger picture, which is Huey Lewis, fortunately it didn't hurt him.
Yeah.
And but I've seen other situations where A&R people, ruin people's careers.
Yeah.
And it's a very sad thing. Now, the good news of that story is I told the story the way I just told it to friends for 10 years. And every single time I told it in those 10 years, I ended with, but I wouldn't be surprised if we don't work together again. And lo and behold, 2 albums later, he did the album where they went off a little bit into jazz, and the fans kind of backed away from that one. So they were in kind of a tenuous place to get back going again. And they were having problems. And Bob called me up and said, would you come up here? I want to talk to you about Huey. So I went right up, went to his house, and he played me a couple days off. He played me a demo of Couple Days Off, which sounded like a smash to me. And I went, they're back, aren't they? And so he said, do you want to jump back in the ring? And I said, absolutely. And so we got back together, and we did that album together, and it was a complete blast. It was so great seeing how everything had changed. Huey had made records prior to the first Huey Lewis and the News record, which I never mentioned. Of course, Chrysalis had them change the name because American Express was not going to go for having a rock band named after him. And so the first Huey Lewis and the News album, the band was, they had done minimal recording other than Huey. But now they, of course, had made 3 more records, and they were very studio savvy, and it, you know, it was a whole different thing. It was kind of interesting, you know, from then to then. And as one of them said to me, he said, you know, when we met you, you were driving the fancy car, and now we're all driving fancy cars too. It was great. But and funny enough, I knew that was a hit a couple days off. And there's a great story about that if you want me to keep going, bring it back up.
Sure, of course.
But we got, we found ourselves, they were still in a bit of a slump writing wise, not, you know, and so it was determined that we would get outside songs. So I got some outside songs on that album that they liked, and we cut those. And then I think it was my idea, I'm not sure, but the idea came up, hey, what about Mutt? And called Mutt Lang. I was on the phone with Huey when we called him, and he sent us a song, and which once again had a different title, and Huey changed it and changed the lyrics a little bit to "Hit Me Like a Hammer," which became the second single off that album. But yeah, so the story ended pretty happily for me. You know, maybe not as happily as it could have been without that initial messing of an A&R guy. But the funny part about that song, the couple days off, so we turn it in, and you know, it's written around some very angry rock, heavy rock guitar. And the guy's been working like crazy, and all he needs is a couple days off, you know, and the song stops, you know, when he does it, where he yells it with all the San Francisco 49ers. He went and got them to all just a portable recording, and just got them to yell "couple days off," and we inserted that into it. So that was kind of fun. So the funny thing about "Couple Days Off" is that song is written around some heavy guitars. The guy is, you know, angst driven. He's worked all week, and all he needs is a couple days off, which Huey went down and I think to a dressing room before a game, if I remember right. In any case, we got the 49ers, the San Francisco 49ers. He's a big sports fan, and they all love him. And he got them to yell "a couple days off." Anyway, and so that's the way the song is written. Well, we turn it in, and I send the single in to be the first single, and the head of promotion calls me and says, "Bill, all of the top stations in the country right now are not playing big electric guitars." I went, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah, so you got to take them off." And I said, "Well, we can't. I mean, the song's written around it." He said, "Just put a bunch of acoustics on it." I said, I really don't think that'll work. You know, it's just destroying the essence of the song. And I said, "But I'll ask Huey." And so I called Huey and told him what the guy had said. I said, "Huey, they want to take those off and put acoustics on it." And he said, "Are you kidding?" I said, "No. What he tells me is if we do that, if we release it as it is, we'll never get those, I think it was 5 at the time, top stations that," he said, we'll never break the top 10. And he said, "That's ridiculous. We can't change the song. Just tell him that's it. No." So I called the guy back and told him the sad story. And of course, this could go into a whole nother conversation that Bill gets a little passionate about, in not a positive way, about how the radio tail started wagging the record company musical dog, telling them what they will and won't play. But by golly, a couple of days off went where? Number 10. Mm-hmm. And the head of A&R told me, he said, "You know, if this had been 2-3 years ago, I think we could have, you know, we would have been top 5, maybe number 1.
We'll have more from Bill Schnee coming up in 3-4 days. His new book is out, Chairman of the Board, The Soundtrack of a Generation. There'll be links in the description of this video and to his website where you can order the book. Make sure you comment on our video, subscribe to our channel, and share our videos. Also, if you want to make a donation to the site, there's a link at the very top of the description. You can also pick up a t-shirt. I'm John Beaudin. Take care of yourself.